Okay, picking up where we left off on page 423, we're talking about the parts of supply chain management and how an ERP could be helpful in that. The next one, we just finished talking about materials requirement. Well, detailed schedule, rather. So materials requirement is, I need to order some material to arrive at a certain time. Purchasing, obviously, I need to place an order for those materials. Otherwise, they're not just magically going to show up on the loading dock. Production, this is like a high-level plan of, okay, I need to have these people show up at this time. This skilled craftsman has to be over here in building A. Sales, ordering, I have to be able to capture that sales data. Okay, so bottom line is, here's an example of an order, sales data we just talked about, where I go through and I type in, here's what I'm going to be ordering. Okay, so that's an example of supply chain management. Another good example is customer relationship management, CRM. And again, this is kind of sort of complex, not quite so much as the other. But this is all about providing positive touch points with the customer. Anytime you interact with the customer, no matter what it is, you want it to be a positive experience. Even if it's the complaint line, you still want to be able to come up with something. So here's an example of, here's all of my customer data. And so, do I send them an email or text message or use, Facebook or phone calls or contacts or other customers and sales and blah, 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 blah. Every time you touch one of these guys, it has to be recorded, has to be processed. So this is all about customer resource planning, customer relationship management, rather. So the goal of all this is to understand and anticipate the needs of your customer, your existing customer, or anticipate the needs of a future customer. That's what it's all about. In other words, if you can kind of sort of tell that the blue, one of the widgets, is selling more than the red widget, okay, and by a huge margin, then maybe you need to go back to supply chain management and say, I need to be ordering more blue dye and less red dye because we need to switch the production. So this is very, very important. Otherwise, you're just blindly producing whatever color you think the customer wants. Don't you really want to know what the customer wants? That'd be kind of cool, wouldn't it? Okay, there's a little bullet list here that talks about some of these things, what it can do. So we're talking about a contact list, sales management, customer support, marketing automation. I will tell you, marketing automation is kind of annoying because what that basically means is those spam emails, okay? I mean, it doesn't have to be. But, collecting all the information, doing some sort of analysis to find, for example, if you don't know the demographic of the person buying your products, then how in the world would you advertise? I mean, would you advertise during Lawrence Welk show along with ads for Metamucil and hearing aids? Is that your target audience? Or is it going to be something else? So, yeah, you need to know who your customers are. Social networking, whether it works with a smartphone, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So that's what that's all about. The next thing you talk about, they kind of shift gears now. And so ERPs typically kind of do all those kind of functions. Now we're talking about something that's not an ERP, although it could be. Mostly it's not part of that. And this is called product lifecycle management. And that is this whole thing about I'm getting ready to build something, and so what all needs to happen? Oh man, I hate these things. Okay. So I need some information. I do some research, I have some concepts, I produce a design, I prototype it out, I go ahead and work it, I produce and assemble product, service, and then just keep going on. So it is quite frankly the life cycle of your product. If you're building a car, you know darn well you're not going to be producing the exact same car for 20 years. That's just not the way the market works. You're going to have to retool and produce new models about every 2, 3, 4 years. Otherwise, people are going to get bored and move on to some other things. So you're constantly looking at who's using your product, who's buying it, who's buying the car, what color cars they like, and then figuring out, okay, I can tell from that we need to improve our speakers because kids are buying these things and they want bigger speakers. Or, the nav system is too dang complicated. It's great for teenagers, but not for old farts. So yeah, you need lots of good information about this. Now, in addition to this kinds of stuff, which your ERP can do, your ERP can do this. There's a little goofy diagram here. There's three terms we need to talk about. One is the CAD. So CAD is the computer-aided design. Okay, computer-aided design, you've probably heard some of this before. This is like the automatic drafting kind of things. I'm designing some product and I can kind of map it out on a computer rather than like a drafting table. Computer-aided engineering. And engineering is more like I'm doing load testing. I'm putting together a car, but I want it to be crash worthy. And so how do I do that? Well, I have these models in the computer that I can, virtually crash my car and see how it crumples up. So these are specialized software-aided engineering tools to do modeling for, load-bearing walls in building a house or crumple zones in a car. And computer-aided manufacturing, CAM, is more about, robotics and changing the processes and tweaking the assembly line, that kind of stuff. So these are all these kinds of things. Now, typically, these are not, you don't get a CAD or CAM or K system from Oracle or SAP, okay? This is not an ERP vendor that would do. These are very, very specialized to your target. So, for example, if I'm building cars, then it's going to be nothing like the system for building toasters. I mean, not at all. I mean, my CAD system is not going to be the same. Certainly my engineering part. So if I'm building bridges, my load bearing on a beam has nothing to do with crumple zones on a car. So these are very, very specific kinds of software that can help you with this product lifecycle management. Okay. Let's keep going here. There's a list of benefits that these guys can provide. A table here, if I can find it. Here we go. So, that's the software. Here we go. Here's the benefits. Yay! I found it. Okay. The first one is increases your time to market. The idea is, let's say you've done one of these before. This is not your first car you've built, and you've got all this system, all this product lifecycle history. You've done this like 3 times. Then more than likely you could pop out cars pretty doggone quick because you've got all the tools, you know exactly what it is, you know exactly how to do things. So these tools can reduce the amount of time it takes to produce a product. It can reduce the cost. Once again, something as simple as, I know exactly how long it's going to take to produce this, build this bridge. So I can accurately predict how many people I need. I can accurately pick how much it's going to cost. I can make better bids. And so in theory, I'm reducing my cost because I'm using, prototyping, and I don't have to build things to crash them. I can virtually crash them, that kind of stuff. And of course, regulatory compliance. If there's audit trails and things that has to happen, well then this can be helpful with that. Another thing that's pretty cool that's not really in here, we talked about, kind of, sort of, is do what-if changes. I've got a design, and somebody comes in and says, well, I think we need to do, an open roof car rather than car with a roof. And you're going to go, ugh. Well, all right, let's cut the roof off and then test the rigidity of the body panels, because most likely we're going to have to do something to the car to make it a little bit more rigid if I cut the roof off. So we do what-if drills. Okay. So we've talked about product lifecycle management, which is kind of tangential to ERP, and we talked about this, which is definitely. And now we're kind of going back. Okay. So this is kind of schizophrenic, so just bear with me. So now we're talking about the challenges of an ERP, and let me just tell you, there've been some colossal ERP failures. I want you to read this one sentence right here. Nearly 200 ERP implementations worldwide evaluated by this company were judged to be failures. So half of the people actually had an ERP system that was so bad, it was done in a hurry, then, yeah. So you don't pick this lightly. You don't just say, sure, I think we need an ERP system. Let's just go ahead and buy one. And the vendor shows up and, gives you a spiel and you go, yeah, I'll buy that. And you go on about your business. That don't work. This is highly, highly detailed. I went through an implementation of one of these, and let me tell you, it was painful. Painful. It took over a year to do. Whew, it was nasty. So let's talk about some of the things that can happen. First of all, these suckers are expensive. One of those tier 1 kind of guys, we're talking millions, plural, millions, to have a tier 1 kind of guy come in. Okay? Very high cost, and it's very disruptive. I mean, we had to pick a time where, it wasn't at the end of our fiscal year, and it wasn't at this, and it wasn't at this. I mean, it took months and months, and we had to run processes in parallel, once in the old system and one in the new system. It was a pain. Long implementation times, yes. Average of 14 months, and they are not kidding. That's about how long it took for us to do ours. Difficult in managing change. Some people are just resistant to change. Some institutions are resistant to change. Some customers are resistant to change. And yeah, you're going to have trouble with that. Management. Yeah, you may need to change the way you do business to meet some sort of a requirement. And this may not be a welcome surprise. So these modifications could be, you're halfway through and you realize, oh my goodness, I'm storing medical data. And you go, whoops, I need to be able to meet all of the HIPAA requirements. So yes, the management of this stuff is pretty wild. Now let me give you one more weird thing that kind of fits in right here with the software customization. Remember I told you that the ERP vendor comes in and says, here are the industry best practices for this, okay? So I go to one of those big guys, and I'm doing, I guess I'm going to go back to shoe repair. I'm doing shoe repair, and they got to come in and they're going to say, well, this is how you ought to manage the stock of raw material in your warehouse, okay? And here are the 4 steps that you need to do. And I go, yeah, I understand, but I've got 5 steps in my system, and I really like my system. And they're going to say, no, you don't understand. The industry best practices has 4 steps for this process, not 5. And you go, I heard you, I understand, but I want 5. And what they're going to basically say is, we are not going to modify our software just for you, okay? Because we want all of our customers to be using the industry best practices. So if it's something trivial, they can probably add it on without too much trouble. But if you're asking them to change a fundamental way the thing works, they're probably going to tell you, no, you have to change to what we provide rather than the other way around. And that can be a little bit annoying. It's one of those, whenever the best practices kind of, like you have like 2 approvals rather than 1 before the document moved on to the next process. In their system they only have 1, but in yours you got 2. It's going to be almost to the point where they're saying, too bad, we know best. Okay? And it's a fight to get them to change these kind of systems. So it was very confusing for me. Okay. We are almost at the end. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is hosting. I mentioned to you guys before that almost all these vendors can do this stuff, hosting in the cloud. And let's look at the benefits of this. First of all, these benefits are fairly common. They're not specific to just doing ERPs. They're basically the same thing we've heard about with doing anything where you take it to the cloud or do hosting. Although this is a good place to stop at the 15-minute mark, we will definitely polish this thing off in just a few more minutes.